Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the sad case of Thomas Davey and the murder of Margaret Davey, which took place in Sleekburn in 1866. Now both Sleekburn and Bedlington are mentioned in this story, and both are really hard to find old photos of. So sadly there may be a lot of repeat photos in this video along with a few fairly recent photos, but I hope you will still find the story interesting. Thomas Davey was born in Northumberland in around 1833. His parents were possibly called John and Anne. Thomas moved to Bedlington in around 1851 and worked as a blacksmith at Sleekburn Colliery. He married Margaret in around 1856. It was said that he was known to be a man of bad character. However, he was not described as a man who drank too much. Margaret Davey, the victim, was born Margaret Handyside in around 1836 in the Newcastle area to parents Jacob and Anne, and was one of at least 4 children. As said earlier, Margaret had married Thomas in around 1856, and the couple had had several children together. However, by 1866, only one of their children, a young girl, was still living. It was said that their marriage was not a happy one. Thomas kept Margaret short of money and food, and she struggled to clothe and feed her family on the money that he gave her. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do find this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is very much appreciated. And it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify, so I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. On the evening of May the 18th, 1866, Thomas Davey returned to his home after hearing some gossip that his wife had taken a loan of some money, which he had not agreed that she could do. He was in a very bad temper about this and shouted and swore at Margaret. He then began to attack her, hitting her in the face and around her head several times. And although Margaret cried out, none of her neighbours came to her aid. When Thomas left the house later, the neighbours told Margaret that she should leave and go to her sister's at Bedlington, and she did this the following day, taking her young child with her. Her sister took her in, and after asking her what had happened, she had told her that Thomas had hit her. Her sister sent for a doctor and the police. Dr. McLaren came to see Margaret. However, there was little he could do for her, and she died almost a week after the attack. Thomas, who had originally been arrested for assaulting his wife, was now charged with her willful murder. He made no comment to the charge. The inquest was held at the Oddfellows Arms at Bedlington before Coroner Cockcroft. Catherine Hegarty said she had identified the body as being that of her sister Margaret Davey. She said Margaret had been married to Thomas for around 11 years and they lived at Sleekburn. She said Margaret had come to her home on the Saturday morning. She had her young daughter with her. She had told her she was poorly but did not say anything else at first. Catherine said that Margaret had 2 black eyes and her face was swollen, and she said she'd sat with her baby daughter until around 10:30 p.m. that night when she had finally gone to bed. She said she had called Dr. McLaren to see her the following day, and he had taken care of her until she died. She said Margaret had complained of pains in her head, and after a few days she was not able to speak clearly. She was sick many times and seemed to talk a lot to herself when she was alone. Catherine said she was able to answer questions but did not seem to make any sense. Thomas, Catherine said, came to her house on the Monday morning following Margaret's arrival. He asked about his daughter, and Catherine said she gave him the little girl and he took her away. She said she had spoken to Thomas, telling him, "You have made a bad job of it this time," and he replied saying, if only she would behave herself. She said she asked him what Margaret had done, and he told her that she had got some money that she had nothing to do with. He did not say anything else. When asked, Catherine said she had never known Thomas to strike her sister in the past, but she did know that they argued a lot. He had left her twice in the past, and Margaret had been supported by her friends while he had been away. She said she had not sent for the police until after Thomas had visited her on the Monday. Dr. Rain of Newcastle said he had been called to perform the post-mortem on the body of Margaret Davey. He said her face was black with bruising. She was very malnourished and looked much older than her true age. He said he'd examined the brain and found a lot of internal bleeding, and it was his professional opinion that she had died due to blood on the brain. He believed that her injuries had been caused due to great violence, stating that these injuries could easily have been caused by someone striking her with their fists. Margaret Sim of Sleekburn said she lived next door to the Davey family. She said on the night of the 18th she saw Thomas come down the road on his way home. She thought he seemed to be sober at the time. A few minutes after he went inside, Margaret said she heard Margaret Davey cry out. It sounded like she was shrieking and yelling. She heard her say, "Oh my Ben." Then she heard what sounded like blows as if someone was striking someone else. A few moments later, she said she saw Thomas come out of his house and go into the home of William Story. He was carrying his daughter in his arms. She said he left the child there and went back to his own house. Margaret Sim said she went into her back room and she could clearly hear the sounds through the wall from the house next door. She heard Mrs. Davey say, "Oh, Tom, don't." She said she did not listen for long, and all seemed quiet after that. The following morning, Margaret Sim said she went into the Davies' house. Thomas was not there, and Margaret was sitting with the child on her knee. Her face was bruised and her eyes were black. She said she told her how bad she looked, and Mrs. Davey said her head felt bad. She said she advised her to go to her sister's at Bedlington, and she said she went there that afternoon. She did not see Thomas that day. When asked, she said she had never seen Mrs. Davey the worse for drink. She was a quiet, peaceful woman. Anne Bell said she also lived at Sleekburn and she lived next door to Mrs. Sim. She said on the night of the 18th she had been outside when she heard some strange noises and what sounded like someone falling. She said she saw Thomas take his daughter to Mr. Story's house, and after Thomas went back into his own house, she said she heard the sounds of screaming, and she said to Mrs. Sim, that would be Margaret and Thomas arguing. Anne said she did not see Thomas go back out, but she did see Margaret go to the Story's house to get her daughter, and at that time she had blood on her face. Anne said she saw Margaret the next day. Her face was badly injured. She did not see her again after that, but she said on the Monday she was at Bedlington when she saw Thomas. He had the child with him, and he asked her what he could feed the baby with. He did not mention his wife being ill or say where she was. Anne said she did not see him again after this. Anne Story said she was the daughter of William Story and lived next door to the Davies. She said on the night of the 18th, Thomas came into her house with his daughter. He simply said, "Here, take hold of the bairn." When she did, she said he just left and went back to his own home. She said she did not hear any noises or screams coming from their home. She said sometime after that Margaret had come for her daughter, but she said she didn't notice if she had blood on her face at the time. She said Thomas often brought the child to her. It was nothing unusual. She did not see either of them again after that night. Thomas Shepherd said he was a tailor at Bedlington. He said Margaret Davey had come to see him to have a suit made for her husband. He said he agreed to make the clothes and she gave him £1 on account. He said 4 days later she returned and asked to take a loan of 5 shillings, saying she would pay it back the following week. Thomas said she did not pay it back but called in twice asking if the clothes were ready. He said he told her he needed the money and she paid him 2 shillings back. He said after that he promised to get the clothes ready. On May the 18th, Thomas said Mr. Davey came to his shop. He asked if his wife had borrowed money, and he said he had told him that she had. He paid the remaining money owed and then took back what was left of his own money. Thomas said he then gave him the money back again and asked him to continue making the clothes. He said Mr. Davey did not seem angry about the money his wife had got and left the shop. However, he said he returned the next day and took the money back again and did not want the clothes made. Now, I have to add here that this was quite confusing. I'm not sure why the money kept going back and forward, but I am guessing that maybe it's after Thomas had charge of his daughter alone, he had taken the money back to take care of her. Sergeant Collins said he had arrested Thomas on the 22nd of May on a charge of assaulting his wife. He said he replied, Yes, I did it. I will not deny it. I have been 11 years married to her, and it has been 11 years too many. I may as well have my neck stretched. Sergeant Collins said the next day they were taking Thomas to prison when he said, "If the wife gets better and she wants anything from the house, tell her she can have it. Get Joe Cowans to give her it all." Sergeant Collins said he told him his wife was very ill, and Thomas said, "I only hit her twice and once was on the forehead." Sergeant Collins said after this he went to the home of Thomas Davey and examined the house. He said he found blood on the floor in several places. He then examined the clothes belonging to Thomas but did not find any blood on them. After this he said he only went to see Thomas one more time, and this was after his wife had died, and he charged him with her wilful murder. He said Thomas did not reply to this, but he fainted a few moments later. Dr. McLaren of Bedlington said he'd been called to see Margaret Davey on May the 20th. He said he'd found her to be in an insensible state. Her face was badly bruised. He said he could hardly tell what was wrong with her as she was in such a state. However, he said her pupils were different in each eye, which to him suggested an injury to the brain. He said on seeing this, he immediately had her head shaved and applied leeches. Dr. McLaren went on to describe several other treatments he had used on Margaret, such as mustard plasters, and this was something used to treat aches and pains. However, he said nothing helped to cure Margaret, and she died a few days later. He said he had been present at the post-mortem and agreed with Dr. Rain's opinion on the cause of death. Robert Dickinson of Ashington said he had met Thomas Davey on May the 20th. He was with another man at the time. He said Thomas had come to his house with him, and his own sister had asked him how his wife was. He said Thomas told her he thought she was well and that she had also left him and he did not know where she had gone. Robert said his sister asked Thomas if he had been hitting his wife, and Thomas replied saying, "No, she fell against my hand and hurt herself." Robert said after they'd had dinner they had gone back out, and Thomas told him that he had found out that his wife had stolen his money from the tailor at Bedlington. He said he had told her before not to do such things. Thomas said he thought Margaret had got the money for her sister so that she could pay her rent. He said he told him that he did not keep his wife short of money. He said she got £2 out of his wages every time, and just recently he had also given her £2 5 extra. The coroner spoke to the jury, saying it was for them to decide what or who caused the death of Margaret Davey. He stated that no one had seen Thomas strike Margaret, but neighbours had heard sounds of an argument, and Thomas himself had said he had hit her. But did he intend to kill her? If they felt he did, then this was wilful murder. If, however, they felt he had not intended to kill her, then it would be a case of manslaughter. And he himself felt it could be nothing more than manslaughter. The jury, who retired for only a few minutes, returned a verdict of guilty of manslaughter against Thomas Davey, and he was committed for trial. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Margaret Davey, and this again, as is often the case, may have been a pauper's funeral. It does not sound as if she or her family had money to pay for a burial. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Margaret anywhere in the area. The trial was held at Newcastle in July of 1866 before Mr. Justice Lush. It was most likely held at the Moot Hall. Thomas pleaded not guilty to the charge. And as is often the case, the majority of the evidence given at the trial is the same as that given at the inquest, so I will only include any new information, and on this occasion there is very little. I did not find any details of the prosecution summing up. However, he did speak to the jury at the start of the trial, where he covered all of the details of the case and stated that this was a clear case where Thomas had ill-used his wife in such a way that it had led to her death, making him guilty of manslaughter. The defence spoke to the jury. He stated that this was not a brutal attack at all. It was nothing like some of the crimes they had heard of in recent years. He said there was no evidence that Thomas had ever struck his wife before or ill-used her in any way, and there was no evidence to suggest that he had intended to kill her. He had only struck her once or twice, and did not wish to cause her serious harm. He said he felt called for a merciful verdict from the jury, and a light sentence from the judge. I did not find any details of the judge summing up, and the jury, who retired for a very short time, returned a verdict of guilty of manslaughter against Thomas Davey. The judge then spoke to Thomas, saying he had been astonished to hear of the slight nature of the alleged provocation in this case. He said something so trivial as his wife taking a loan of 5 shillings did not give Thomas the right to attack his wife in such a brutal way. He said Thomas must have known that the blows he inflicted upon his wife would cause her serious injury, and he could not view this case in anything other than a serious light. He then sentenced Thomas to 5 years penal servitude. It was said that Thomas had been upset during the trial. Several times he had sobbed while the witnesses gave evidence, and after his sentence had been passed, he had been removed from the dock in an almost unconscious state. Sadly, I was not able to find out which prison Thomas was sent to serve out his sentence, and I do not know when he was released from prison. However, it does appear that he did eventually return to the Morpeth area, as it is possible that he died in Morpeth in around 1910 at the age of around 78 years. Probably the saddest of all was the fact that I was unable to find any further details of the young daughter of Thomas and Margaret. Her name was not mentioned in any news articles, so it was difficult to find any details for her. It seems that she may sadly have ended up in the Union workhouse, unless Margaret's sister was able to take her in and take care of her, and we can only hope that that was the case. This was an incredibly sad story, although it was one where drink does not seem to have played any part in it. It does seem to be a case where Thomas wasn't a particularly nice man, who may not have ill-used his wife with his fists, but he did keep her short of money and did not treat her well. Margaret, it seems, tried to keep her family going as best she could, finding a way to bring food into the house by taking a loan from the tailor, a loan it seems she found hard to pay back. But when Thomas found out, he reacted in a most violent manner. He clearly did not like the idea of people thinking his family needed money, and did not like the fact that Margaret had taken money from a stranger. And poor Margaret was probably only trying to feed her child. This led him to attacking his wife, hitting her more times, I am sure, than he ever admitted to. He does not seem to have had any thought for his young daughter either, if her mother was no longer around to take care of her. Were the jury correct to find Thomas guilty of manslaughter? Well, yes, I think they were. He did admit that he had hit her, and he does not seem to have cared for her much, based on the fact that he said he'd been married to her for 11 years too long. He may not have intended to kill her, but his actions caused her death, and I think the jury did not take any notice at all of the summing up by the defence when coming to their decision. Was the judge correct to send Thomas to prison for 5 years? Well, yes, he most definitely was. However, I think that he deserved a much longer sentence, and I am sure that the judge thought that too. But what do you think? Do you think Thomas only hit his wife twice, as he suggested? Or do you think he hit her several times, causing the serious injuries that led to her death? Do you think he really wasn't aware of the damage he had done, or do you think he knew exactly what he had done? Do you think the jury were correct to find Thomas guilty of manslaughter, and do you think 5 years penal servitude was enough for the crime he committed, or should he have been sent to prison for a much longer term? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this sad and tragic story interesting, and I do thank you all very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week.